me,
Yes,
please?
yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have chosen my topic as extensions, generalizations, and refinements in mathematics in general and developments in fractional differential equations using the approach that follows the Dr. Lakshmikantam's principles of inequalities and comparison theorems. So let me start with the outline of what I have. So I wanted to start with something that everyone knows. So I'm considering the real line and then considering the axioms of the real line, then see the generalizations in algebra, then go to functional analysis, then real analysis, and then start with the theory of initial value problems of ODEs. Just give you an explanation of what it is. Then see the drawbacks and the fractional derivatives that are there, and the new definitions that have come up, and some other recent definitions that have been in picture. Then I'll sum up what I'm presented. So if you consider the real line, you know that I have just drawn this just for the sake of a similarity that I need. So you know that the invention of zero had made life very easy for us and the discovery of the great Indians. So once you have the zero, you have the frame of reference. So you can actually give a numbering or to the continuum of the real line. So you know that you can have the negative real numbers on the left side and the positive real numbers on the right side. And you can do a lot with the real numbers. Now the extension of real line is the plane, like length and breadth. So once you have the plane, it's interesting. You can do many things. Though we have done the vectors, shown it as vectors, but you can observe that this can be considered as an extension of R, and the addition that we have done in R is actually translated in a way literally to R2, and it goes to the space R3 and so on till Rn. There is not much of a difference. You can clearly see the parallels. Now, the one thing that I would like you all to remember here is that the vector 1, 0 and the vector 0, 1, which will be a basis for R2, and in general, the vector En, the vector En where it forms a basis for Rn. Now, let's keep that in mind so that we will talk about it a little later. So I want you all to remember the En, which is the basis for Rn. Okay. Now, excuse me, sir. Can you tell me how I can unannonate it so that people won't stop writing on the screen?
You just go in security.
Okay.
And just click on that.
Okay.
And there is a tick mark will be there, right? You just
I remove it.
Yes.
Remove it.
Yes. Then okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So then we go to the so with this we have the Rn space in as an extension of R. Now let me leave that aside for a little while and let's go to the axioms of the real line. Now once we have the axioms of the real line, you can see that the addition, which is the normal addition we have in mind, here the closure associated all the 11 properties of the real line which make it a field. Now we will look at it in the sense of there are 11 properties over here. Can we reduce some of them and do something with it, which is what the algebra does. So you reduce some of the properties on the real line, you have a real ring. Then you reduce some more properties, you end up with a vector space. Then you reduce some more, you have an abelian group, a group and a semi-group. So this is the refinements that we have on the real line, on the R, using the addition and the dot product, scalar multiplication that is there on R. But then how do you generalize it? So what you do, you take a non-empty set, you define two binary operations on it as I have shown by a dot and a circle. And then you try to study how much you get all the properties that are there on the field. You work with them. You see how many properties you get to get a group. If those properties are not satisfied, you try to see if you can get a semi-group and so on and so forth. Okay. So the vector space I want you all to keep in mind so that I'm going to link it up again. Now the binary operations. So we have generalized from R to a non-empty set X. The binary operation of addition and dot product have been generalized to binary operations circle dash and circle circle. Then you can extend it to ternary and n-ary operations. So this is an extension which leads to the study of algebraic structures in algebra. Now, I'll stop algebra for a little while and then we'll go to the functions. The functions are the crux of the real analysis, or in fact any analysis. And these are the most important tools. These are also used by the algebra people, and they end up with a homomorphism, endomorphism, isomorphism, etc. But I'll stress from now onwards to analysis because I plan to go to the differential equations. So analysis is analysis means functions, and when we first talk about functions, the most important thing is the limit concept. Well, according to well, can I ask you a question? Is it fine with everyone? Can I talk like this?
Yes, madam.
No problem. Okay.
Yeah.
So we observe that everything is a limit in analysis. For that is, the continuity is a limit, the differentiation is a limit, integration is a limit, everything is a limit. So this concept of limit plays a vital role in the whole of analysis and the whole of differential equations, especially when you want to study stability theory. So let me spend a little time on this. The notation that we use for limit is like this, what I have written over here. Like extending to a f of x is equal to L. Now, what it means is it is like a language, and what it means is given epsilon greater than 0, you can find a delta such that whenever absolute value of x minus a is less than delta implies f of x minus f of a is less than epsilon. Now, this definition, I guess we will discuss a little more. The reason being that this is the crux, so we spend a little time on this. Now, what does this epsilon mean? Instead of treating epsilon as some obscure quantity, let us think that it is telling us how much error we can make when we try to approximate, when we say that f of x approaches f of a. So this is given to us. So it is telling us how much error we can make when you are trying to find the limit. And what you are supposed to find is the delta. That means how near should the x be near a? How near x should be to a? So that's what the delta epsilon delta definition gives us. And I'm sure since most of you are all teachers, you must have been working with it and also telling your students this delta epsilon delta definition. I would like to share the way I teach my students when I teach this limit concept. What I would say is, now suppose you are on the ridge of a hill or a big mountain, and then you want to look down into the valley, or so what you would do, you would go as near as possible and try to look down. If you are a very daring person, you would put one leg and look down, but you would never put two legs because you would go down. So that A is like the deleted. You cannot enter that point. Deleted neighborhood of A means that you cannot enter the A. And then this, depending on what your work is in that region of what your function is, you can go 10 feet nearer the ridge, 20 feet nearer the ridge, or 1 foot nearer the ridge. That depends on the error that is given to you, that that is given to you, the epsilon that tells you that you can go so far near the ridge. So keeping that in mind, you try to choose your x. This is another simple example. Now I would like you all to remember this definition again, because I would like to talk about this again in stability theory. Now, as the question is the notation, let's look at the notation. The notation says that x approaches a. Now the question is, what do you mean by saying x approaches a? Because we know that R is a continuum, and so however small interval we have taken, there is an uncountably infinite number of points. So when you say x approaches a, it should mean something. So as usually we say that for every sequence xn converging to a, we should be able to find the limit goes to the same point L. Then we say that it converges. Now, when you are talking about sequences, I would like to stress that we need to have absolute value or a distance concept involved. So as long as the distance concept is there, we can talk about sequences, and in R, we have no problem. So we can talk about sequences. But again, now when we talk about the limit extending to a, obviously we will tell our students that you have to check the left hand limit and the right hand limit. Both of them should be exist and they must be equal to L. Now again, when you talk about the left hand limit and the right hand limit, the question arises, I said we will work with sequences. Now, any sequence will not play a good role. We need to have increasing sequences or decreasing sequences. And these are given by limit infimum and limit supremum. So as such, when we talk about limits, the only concepts that are really which we can work with are limit infimum and limit supremum, which are actually dealt in the undergraduate classes. So I'm just giving you a brief review so that you would get used to the all this. I'm sure all this is what you know, but before I pick up with what I wanted to put in, I want to show you all the similarities that exist. So I'm trying to go to the basics. Okay. Now look at continuity. Again, the same structure. You have the limit as x tends to a, f of x equals f of a. You have continuity. That is what we show as a notation. Again, there are left limits and right limits. So that concept is again considered, left continuity, right continuity. And here the concept of upper semi-continuity and lower semi-continuity comes up. Now this upper semi-continuity and lower semi-continuity we may not see much in R, but when we work with sets and actually set differential equations or multi-valued differential equations, these concepts play a vital role. Now let's go to the derivative. Again, derivative is a limit. And when you would like to talk about the derivative, you have to talk about the left derivative and right derivative, which is again a limit concept. Now here again, you take the infimums and supremums from left side and right side. So there are 4 derivatives that will come up, which are called as Dini derivatives. So the Dini derivative is a limit derivative or a limit subderivative. If it's from the left hand side, it is a limit infimum left hand side derivative. If it is from the right hand side, it is a limit infimum right hand side derivative, and similarly the limit supremum. So you have 4 Dini derivatives. Dini derivatives are important for us because most of the time when the derivative does not exist, which is a natural case in applications, you try to work with Dini derivatives. Now remember, when most of the applications, what we observe nowadays is that there is no continuity, there is no differentiability. It's a very rough edge region that they work with, the rough surfaces, they are non-smooth surfaces. So non-smooth analysis has come into being, and it is a very important area now. And there the concept of subdifferentials and proximal normals using directional derivatives exists. Though I'm not going to go into that area, I'm trying to show you all how things extend. So that's the reason why I have talked about this non-smooth analysis, because you are refining over there. See, the derivative, if it exists, is some concept. Left derivative existing, right derivative exists is a refinement. Again, limit Dini derivatives is again a refinement. When are you interested in these refinements? When you do not have the structure that is known to when the structure that is given to you does not satisfy the concepts that are already known, you try to reduce and refine as much as you can and try to satisfy the setup given by the applications. Okay. Now with this, I'm going to go to the initial value problem. No, before going to the initial value problems, I would like to stop a little while and talk about some other generalizations which you can see. Now, we have defined R plus dot as a vector space or as a field, and then I said you can start with any binary operation for a non-empty set and define make the definitions of binary operations and check whether we have a what properties they satisfy, whether it will be a group or a vector space and so on. Now vector space, I said we will talk about it again. Reason being, once you have a vector space, you can do lots of analysis and also lots of algebra. Lots of algebra. And when you put in the distance function onto it, a norm, then you get a non-linear space. So vector in a once it becomes a non-linear space, you can start working with functions. Now, so once you start working with the functions, then you can start extending the concept of distance to a norm, which I have already said, then to a metric, or vice versa. Once you have a metric, you can actually generalize that metric to open sets and start topology. So that's how the extension goes. Okay, and when you're the whole of the topology becomes a generalization because you only work with open sets. So there, the distance is no more there. You work with you look at the definition of the metric distance function. What it does, it has two properties: arbitrary union of open disks is open, and arbitrary finite intersection of open disks is open. So you take that to extend it to open sets and then generalize the concept of topology. Now, leaving aside the topology, let's consider the functions again. Once you have the functions, till now we have been working with functions from R to R, say R into R, so on you can extend. Now generalization, let X be any vector space and Y be any other vector space. You can start about mappings from F, X to Y and so on. With this in picture, what happens is there can be a question that applied people need functions. In applications, if you talk about a derived initial value problem, your solution is a function which is continuous and differentiable if you're talking a system of first order derivative. So functions become elements in certain cases. So what you do is you take all functions defined on some interval AB and then put them in one place, define an addition and a scalar multiplication, you set up a vector space. Now define a norm on it, then you get a norm-linear space. Normally the L2 space is important, reason being, when you have an L2, you can work parallel to Rn. Remember I was telling you all, remember the En basis. What is the importance of that En basis? You have the perpendicularity concept in Rn. Now here what we did was we considered all the functions. We have introduced a norm-linear space, and suppose you include completeness, so you get a Banach space. But because there is no perpendicularity concept involved over there, we cannot talk about orthogonality. So the inner product is introduced, you get a Hilbert space, and because of the Hilbert space, you can talk about orthogonal sets, orthonormal sets, and immediately parallel to the En, which is a basis in Rn, you can talk about orthonormal sequences or similar to a basis in function space. And these orthonormal sets which give rise to Fourier series and other series are useful in signal processing and applications. So the reason why this is a generalization and a very good generalization of the basis concept, which is not an extension, but you're taking that idea, people have developed this. Now next, let me go to the now question here. Am I going very fast? Can someone tell me if I'm going very fast?
Okay, madam, it is okay.
It's okay, fine. Now here, let's go to the initial value problems of ordinary differential equations, because I'm going to stress my work on fractional differential equations. But again, I want to see you all the parallels. You just do not work from nothing. You have a basis and you start with it. And the basis is the initial value problems if I'm working with fractional differential equations, initial value problems. Okay. So I consider an initial value problem. And the first question that we always have is whether the solution exists or not, existence and uniqueness. And we do have this joke on mathematicians that they only talk about exist and they forget. They really do not worry about finding the solutions. The reason being, our job is to give criteria for the applied people to know whether they have a solution or not. So remember, the applied people do the mathematical modeling. They have to model their physical phenomena. And once they model their physical phenomena, they get some right-hand side function f of tx. And then they have to understand whether what they have found makes sense or not, whether there exists a solution or not. And it has been the job of mathematicians to give criteria where they can find the existence and uniqueness. So once they know that the criteria is satisfied, they know that the solution exists and is unique. So they can work with either numerical methods or Lepno theory to find out the solution, to find out the properties of the solutions, or simulate them. Right now, simulation, so they can do simulation and try to find the solutions or whatever they were looking for. Now, existence and uniqueness, the famous are Peano's and Picard's theorem. Then continuity and differentiability with respect to initial values is very important, as yesterday's speaker, Dr. Balan, has said. this leads to the stability. He has actually avoided these two and said the stability, but we need these two. And when you have existence, uniqueness, continuity and differentiability, then the problem is said to be well posed, as he has said actually. And once you have that, you can talk about stability. So inherently, he used these two to imply stability. It's a way of looking at it. So, but I have just written it because basically I'm doing the complete setup. So I wrote it in this fashion. Now, once you have the stability, then there is a Lyapunov approach where you talk about studying the equilibrium of the solution or stability of the solution without knowing what the solution is. But here I would like to stress upon, let us look at the existence and uniqueness theorems proofs. How do you work with them? Because most of us have taught these courses, so I'm just going in very fast. You transform it into an integral equation, and then say that every solution of the differential equation is a solution of the integral equation and vice versa, and use techniques to show that there exists a solution for the integral equation, either fixed point or successive approximation or any other approach. And then that has been the approach for a long time until Professor Lakshmikantam came into picture. What he started was, he started working with inequalities. What he did, in place of the equality in this equation over here, he put a less than or equal to inequality or a greater than or equal to inequality on both places, the same thing. Then what happens? When you have such an inequality, he named that if any function satisfies the inequality, if it satisfies the less than or equal to inequality, he called it as a lower solution of the differential equation. And if it satisfies the greater than or equal to inequality, as an upper solution. So with this in picture, they have done the fundamental inequality theorem, which gives you the criteria. If the upper solution and lower solution are less than or equal to one another at the initial value, then they're less than or equal to one another in the whole interval of definition which they are working in. Now, this fundamental inequality theorem has undergone lots of extensions and lots of generalizations. There are very, very nice results, but I'm not going to go through them. Now, using this fundamental inequality theorem, we talk of existence of solutions in a closed set. Remember, both the Peano's theorem and the Picard's theorem, they give you the existence of solution in a small interval 0 alpha, where alpha is an open end. That's the important part. You do not get at the end point, there is no solution. It's an open interval. But the monotone iterative technique and the quasi-linearization, they give you existence of solutions in a closed set. The idea in both of the cases is that you have a lower solution and an upper solution, which bounds the solution of the problem that we are interested in. And then you try to use the iterative technique to obtain the sequence of iterates that converge to the solution. Now, when we use the monotone iterative technique, what we have is we get is the existence of a maximal solution or a minimal solution. So you get sequences converging from above and below to the maximal solution from above and to the minimal solution from below. And in between the sequences, there can be many solutions because the hypothesis assumes one-side Lipschitz condition. So you have existence of many solutions. So once you have this monotone iterative technique, you look at the convergence. We are saying that the sequence converges and it is a constructive technique, but the convergence is linear in monotone iterative technique. So then Bellman worked with the concept of quasi-linearization. He introduced the concept where he showed that the convergence is quadratic when you use this approach. So, and this has been taken up by Dr. Lakshmikantam and his group, and it has been actually extended and refined. The technique is similar to that of the monotone iterative technique, where you try to find a sequence of solutions of a sequence of linear differential equations which can be solved and the solution can be found, and these iterates converge monotonically to the solution. Now, both monotone iterative technique has a research monograph published by Dr. Lakshmikantam, Dr. Ladde, and Dr. Vatsala. And I am sure most of you must have looked into it, and you can see lots of generalizations, extensions to various types of setups of differential equations, periodic boundary value problems, and etc. And similarly, quasi-linearization, I think it's a book with Dr. Vatsala and Dr. Lakshmikantam. You can see lots of extensions and refinements. And these I'm going to, of course, work with fractional differential equations also. Now let's go to the stability concept in this setup. Again, stability concept has been, begins with the Lipnow's theorem, where you have the concept of uniform stability and uniform asymptotic stability, but this had been generalized, refined actually. You have equistability, equiasymptotic stability, quasi-equiasymptotic stability, and so on. If you look at Professor Lakshmikantam's book on differential and integral inequalities, volume 1, you can see a host of definitions wherein you see the hair splitting. Now, then the stability has been extended to various types of differential equations, boundary value problems, integral differential equations, etc. And there have been new types of stability has been found, like practical stability. Now, the reason for the existence of practical stability is, I'll give you a simple example over here. See, for example, a flight going from one destination to another has to be stable. The path should be stable, otherwise it will fall. But you all of us, and that means it should be in some epsilon frame if it is stable. But what happens when suppose there's a turbulence somewhere in the sky? If there is a sudden change in weather, there will be lots of turbulence. And all of us have traveled, experience a zigzag movement where it goes up and down, it oscillates, and then it stabilizes. This concept does not fit into the property of stability, and so they had to introduce a new concept called practical stability. And then there are many other types, conditional stability, there are so many other types of stability. And then the complete generalization of stability is the H0H stability, which has been introduced, and there's a book by Dr. Lu and Dr. Lakshmikantam, where this concept has been dealt completely. Now, what I would like to show you, as I said, the epsilon in the limit concept denotes the error, and the delta denotes how much error we can make. Now, I would like to put that in example in the perspective of stability. And that to suppose, since I'm in Andhra Pradesh, and we always are proud that we have the ISRO launching site over here at Sriharikota. And suppose they are trying to launch a vehicle or an orbital onto the moon, say. Then what would the ISRO do? They do a lot of simulation. They have the path decided. But then suppose they wanted to fall on some point, say A on the moon, they would not say exactly the point. They would give it a radius, some epsilon radius. And that epsilon tells you that the error you can make while landing, instead of landing at the point A, you can land it in some region of A, or in some in some region surrounding the A, or in some neighborhood of A. Now what happens? That means that when they made this trajectory, when they made this plan, they had some initial conditions. Say, let us take two of them of the umpteen number of conditions they have as initial parameters. That is considered a couple, which is, say, the wind speed and the temperature. Suppose they have made the simulation for 2 knots per hour wind speed, and the temperature is around 28 degrees when they plan to launch the vehicle. But then what happens at the exact time when they're planning to launch the vehicle, on that day, on the real time, the wind speed is 1.8 knots per hour, say, and the temperature is 27.9. Should they go or should they not? So when they know that it will be impossible to start the vehicle to launch the vehicle at the exact time, at exact similar conditions as that they have analyzed it, or whether they have taken the path, whether they have simulated, or the way they have simulated. So what they do, they give a delta approximation, a delta region neighborhood, where you can make some changes. You are given that laxity, and that laxity is the delta. If the weather is, suppose if it is a very rainy day, then immediately they would stop launching. Suppose there is a cyclone coming up, they would stop launching. So you can see what the epsilon and the delta do in the limit. They are so important concepts that help us with practical problems. Now from here, do you have any questions? If you do not have any questions, I'm going to go to fractional differential equations and its concepts. Any questions, sir? Okay, so I'm going to go to the concept of fractional derivative, and again you must have heard it any number of times that fractional derivative is the has come up because of the question posed by L'Hopital to Leibniz when Leibniz introduced the derivative nth derivative notation for the nth derivative of x with respect to t, say. So then again you can observe there is an extension from first derivative to second derivative so on to nth derivative. Now here is the big jump, which is a generalization, because L'Hopital asked what if f and f becomes a fraction. So this led to many mathematicians working on them. And here I will start with the basics. So if you wanted to proceed with that, they did not start with the derivative, they started with the integral. The reason being, integral has some very nice things. The integral is, you have the fundamental theorem of calculus, which is very, very helpful. And then the second thing is this Cauchy formula. See, what is this Cauchy formula doing? It is taking an iterated integral and making it into a single integral. And what is it having? The n iterated integral is coming up here in the integrand, and also in the as a factorial function. So when they generalized, what they did, in place of n, they placed the real number alpha, and for the factorial function, they replaced it with its generalization, the gamma function, and introduced a derivative. For integral. So now keep this in mind, because it helps us to discover new integrals, new fractional derivatives that have come up. The main idea is this, the crux is over here. Now then Riemann has defined it in one fashion, Liouville has defined it in another fashion, in the sense that the limits were different for both of them, and that gave rise to so many different, formulas, which I guess all of you will be knowing. Anyway, there is a lecture on fractional calculus and derivatives, so I'm going to jump from here. So you have the Riemann-Liouville integral defined. Now from integral to derivative, they had this beautiful logic. If you have alpha, the component that alpha derivative which you must take, they have written alpha as alpha equals to m plus alpha minus m, and then broke it into two parts using the indices. So the dm became the mth derivative of x with mth derivative with respect to x, and the im minus alpha became the ith fractional integral. So with this beautiful concoction, they could define the fractional derivative. Now this gave some problems because of this. The constant of the Riemann-Liouville derivative of a constant is different from 0. Then Caputo came up with the wonderful idea of interchanging both of them so that the derivative of a constant becomes 0. Now there are, as I said earlier, I'm repeating it here, there have been umpteen number of definitions given over the centuries by many mathematicians, of them Hadamard, Caputo, Riesz, so on. They have their own advantages, but all of them have one problem. Some of them, except Caputo and Caputo-like derivatives, all of them have the problem is that the derivative of the constant is not 0. They do not satisfy the product rule, they do not satisfy the quotient rule, they do not satisfy the chain rule, and they do not have mean value theorems as in ordinary derivatives. In fact, there is a mean value theorem that has been developed it is in the Dr. Lakshmikantam's book Fractional Differential Systems, but uses a concept what is called as ultra-Mittag-Leffler function. So it's not easy. Then, as we remember, there are people who are in search of finding the similarity, and then the Dr. Khalil and his group defined this derivative, which is a fractional derivative of some type. And this satisfies all the product rule, quotient rule, Rolle's theorem, etc. Now, what they did, in place of f of t plus h, they replaced it by f of t plus h t to the 1 minus alpha. Now, once when this is done, there came Katagampala, who said, I can make a better approximation. He said, okay, you take in place of f of t plus h, t to the h, t to the minus alpha. And then this is the most natural approach for fractional calculus. And why is it he said so? Because if you linearize e to the h, t to the minus 1 minus t to the minus alpha and substitute, then you get the Khalil's definition as a special case. Now we have been working on a project, and Professor Sen, who has been as the director of Professor V. Lakshmikantham Institute for Advanced Studies, he said, now if you want to get a better result, what you should do is you should consider the system Ax equals to B, where FD ka means Khalil's definition, FD cut means Katagampala's fractional derivative, and the m denotes from left hand side, and the without the m it is on the right hand side, and on the right hand side of the system you have the ordinary derivative. So he said find two values k1 and k2 using this approach. Then the linear combination, it's missing over here. Then he said a new derivative defined as a linear combination of Kalal and Katagampala will give a better approximation. So I'll leave this here because this approach hasn't gained much of support. People, even Katagampala himself defined a new derivative, which I'm going to put towards you all. This starts again, as I said, though you want the derivative, you work with the integral first, reason being again the iteration. Now, if you remember the integral that I have shown you, an iterated integral I have shown you earlier, this t1 to the row, tn to the row is not there. So it's again generalization. You're extending it using another function. A better word is generalization because you have used a new function. And then you came up with this iteration. Now in place of n, I'll put alpha. I'm sorry, I think if I smallen it up, now I missed it. This end part I missed it, but you can see here, which is replaced by alpha in place of n. So once you replace with, again the same process, you observe, I'm trying to put down to you all the similarities when you do research, how they extend. So you in place of n, they put alpha, and in place of n minus 1 factorial, they put the gamma n function, and they define the generalized fractional integral. Now, with this integral in place, he defined the Riemann-Liouville integral in this fashion, and then using the relation between Caputo and Riemann-Liouville, he defined the Caputo-Katagampala derivative as a integral. Sorry, I'm sorry over here. This thing, 1 by gamma of 1 minus alpha has not come up, but he had defined the Caputo-Katagampala fractional derivative. And here you can see we have found they did it. I'm just putting it forward. That they have he had defined the power function for the Caputo-Katagampala derivative for x to the nu, a power function. So using this, you can find the Caputo-Katagampala derivative for any analytic function. Okay. Now, it did not stop over here. Then Fabrizio came up with another derivative, and it is called as Caputo-Fabrizio derivative, where the 1 by t minus s, even if you see over here, if you put rho equals to 1, you are going to get the Caputo derivative. So you can see that in play t minus s, if t equals to s, it's a singularity. So they wanted to avoid this, so they have defined using the kernel in the integral as a exponential function. And they have introduced a normalization function to take care of some irregularities that may exist. Now the most important part over here is the non-singularity in the kernel, and the other way they themselves have said that this model is useful for modeling real-world problems using exponential decay law because there's a minus sign. So from this you can observe that different sets of problems may need different fractional derivatives, and that is the why there are so many fractional derivatives. And in fact, if you have come across a problem that may need a new derivative, then you can start defining it by following the concepts that I shared with you all earlier. And also, if you look at the Fractional Dynamical Systems book by Dr. Lakshmikantan, you can see that they have given the reason why Riemann-Liouville integral was chosen when there were many other integrals. The reason being that it satisfies most of the properties satisfied by the ordinary Riemann integral. So that is the reason why they have chosen that Riemann fractional integral compared to others. So keeping those all in mind, one can start defining a new fractional derivative and work with it. Now it did not stop over here. A group called Artangano, Balino, they have come up with another derivative. They have replaced the exponential function with the Mittag-Leffler function, and they say that in their paper, actually in his blog he has written, Artangano has written that this derivative can take care of so many types of problems in very varied applications, like problems having more covariant process, non-more covariant process, and so on. So it's a very interesting derivative that has been coming up. Now next, I would like to share with you all a variable order derivative that has been introduced, right? I mean, it has been introduced in 1993. That's the first paper that I have seen. And you can see that there is not much of a difference except that the alpha is replaced by alpha of t. Now this gives lots of problems, so most of the work is in numeric analysis over here. Now next, now this is one phase I have done. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some of the results that we have done using initial value problems of fractional derivatives. I'm going to be quick. Unless you have a question, I'm not going to go very fast, because all I want you all to see is the parallels that are there. That's the most important part. You take up one area and then you develop parallelly the system. So you have the Riemann-Liouville fractional derivative over here, and this is the basic lemma. I mean, I need to talk a little about this lemma. Now, before this lemma came into picture, the theorems on initial value problems of fractional differential equations, Peano's, Picard's, and so on, all the even Monton technique, were done with the concept of Holder continuity, which is very difficult to check. So with this theorem, this says that you can work with continuous functions. So this became a very important result. With this, then you study the basic fundamental inequality theorem. In the setup of Riemann-Liouville fractional derivatives, you have a one-sided Lipschitz condition that will help you with the inequality over here. You have that in the initial point, you have they must satisfy this criteria, and then you have this condition if the function that works is Lipschitz, one-sided Lipschitz. Then the same thing, you have the Caputo derivative. Now here is another concept that is given in this theorem. Now you look at this, what it says is if the Caputo derivative of m of t is less than or equal to some g of t m of t, then you have that if you know the maximal solution, if you have the maximal solution of this system, then you can compare this system, then you have some result. Let me come back later. But what does it says? What it basically means is that suppose you have a very complicated system and you want to study it. Then what you try to do is you take some norm or something, and then it becomes m of t is some positive function. Say m of t is equal to norm x of t. Then you want to see if it is dominated by some known function g of t m of t. Now if the system CDQ equals to g of t is u of t at t naught equals to u naught, this is a simpler system whose maximal solution is known. Then the g of t m of g, this g dominates the system, complicated system in some fashion. Then if at the initial value this of the complicated system is less than or equal to the initial value of the simpler system, then you can say that the solution of the complicated system is less than or equal to the maximal solution of the simpler system. That's what this says in a simpler fashion. So once you have this is one type of comparison theorems. There are a lot. I just wanted to put in those results that give you different ideas. Now, what happens is in fractional differential equations, when, as I said, we put m of t equals to norm x of t or something like that, you cannot take the derivative, because when you take absolute value function, you observe the function which is like this on both sides of the x-axis comes to the top of the x-axis like this, like a, what should I say, semicircles, sequence of semicircles. And you can see that at the meeting points with 0, you do not have the derivatives. You do not have a derivative because the left derivative will not be equal to the right derivative. Keep the absolute value of x function in mind. Then so what you need to do is you have to work with Dini derivatives. Now when we are working with Dini derivatives, we have come across a problem that not always do they satisfy, because there is an integral over there, the absolute value of the integral should interchange. And so we have done a work, we have introduced what are called as dominant components. And with those, when these dominant component conditional criteria are satisfied, we have shown that you can talk about the comparison, as the result which I have shown you earlier. That you can talk about comparison between the maximal solution and the solution of the given differential system. I'm going to stop here with this, and then I have 5 or 10 more minutes. I'm going to go quickly. Then there is another concept. Normally, people have been working with Caputo differential equations and Riemann-Liouville fractional differential equations. Now, right now, they're working with Caputo-Fabrizio and Caputo-Cottagampalla, but basically, you work with Caputo fractional or Riemann-Liouville. Then what happens is, if you work with Riemann-Liouville, then you can extend automatically. All the results will be satisfied by the solutions of Caputo fractional differential equations, but vice versa does not hold. So if you have proved some result for Caputo fractional differential equation, you have to prove it again for Riemann-Liouville. Okay, and that's what it means. Okay. Now, then this is what we have said. Now let me quickly go to the stability concepts. Okay, there is one other interesting concept, which is the variational Lyapunov method, which is again another interesting technique. Okay, oh yeah, I wanted to share with you all that till now we have not found out the variation of parameters formula for fractional differential equations. It's still an open question, and all that has been done is that you try to find the link the fractional derivative with that of the ordinary derivative and find and given variation of parameters formula. This is there in the Fractional Dynamical Systems Volume 1. Now, variational Lyapunov method is a very interesting concept, because what happens is when you use the Lyapunov method, you use a function v of dx that is normally positive definite. That means some of the good structure of the differential equation may be lost when you're doing this, when you're taking a norm, when you're introducing a Lyapunov function. So what they did was they combined the variation of parameters formula with the Lyapunov method and called it as a variational Lyapunov method. And this comes up, this is there in the book by Dr. Leela, Dr. Martinuk, and Dr. Lakshmikantam, Stability Analysis. You can see that result, okay? And this has been done for fractional differential equations. And for that, we have to introduce the Grunwald-Letnikov fractional derivative and use the Grunwald-Letnikov fractional derivative and the Dini derivative for the Lipschitz, for the Lyapunov function over here. So this is the Grunwald-Letnikov fractional Dini derivative for the Lyapunov function and corresponding Caputo fractional D derivative. So the concepts of stability are given. Remember, you have given uniform attractivity, uniform asymptotic stability. This is again generalizations or extensions, whatever you like. Now, this result is gives you the, if you have a perturbed system, you use the variational Lyapunov method to study the properties of the perturbed system with respect to the given system. Okay. Then So this is the stability result I'm going through because I'm going to run out of time. Now, look at this slide again. I have given one of the latest results. This is the Kaputta-Kottakamala derivative. They have considered the initial value problem over here. And again, you can see, I'm sorry, this is a V. I tried to change it. It did not change for some odd reason. This is not theta, it's V over here. So you can see that lemma, I said, remember that lemma d plus m of t1 greater than or equal to 0. Similarly, if you put m of t equals to u of t minus v of t, that's exactly that lemma. And again, they have done a comparison theorem over here, which is similar to the one that I have shown you earlier. So this is in the fuzzy fractional differential equations published in Fuzzy Sets and Systems. Now from here, I'm planning to, summing up, it's typed not properly, summing up. So what I would like to sum up is this, what basically we start with something based, the real line is at the back of mind for most of the stuff. Then when you look at applications, you have some properties and you may not have some properties. So depending on them, you define your plus and dot. For example, if you take, suppose your X has the set of all compact convex sets, then the addition that is defined and the scalar multiplication that is defined, you have a book on set differential equations, you can look into it. Then you define a Hausdorff distance. And once you have a setup of Hausdorff distance, you have a linear space because of plus and dot, and because of the distance, you can talk about vector space, non-linear space and so on, and you make it complete, and you can work with, you have the algebra that is necessary, and then you work with set differential equations. Similarly, you have a fuzzy, the concept of fuzziness, once the concept of fuzziness came into picture, the concept of fuzzy arithmetic was introduced, and then the distance between fuzzy sets, which is again the Hausdorff distance, was introduced, and then fuzzy algebra was introduced, fuzzy fractional differential equations also came into picture, and there's again a research monograph on it. Now, many other setups, you add two things and you come up with a new one. So like integral equations or differential equations came up with integral differential equations, which is actually a very useful model that has been developed by Volterra and Lotka to study problems in ecology, and that has been extended, the theory has been developed. And if you look at any of these books, any of the research monographs, you see a definite pattern: existence, uniqueness, continuity with respect to initial values, and so on and so forth, stability and so on. So what basically my idea has been to showcase to you all that there is a similarity, there is a parallel that is running up. Most of the time you extend your results, sometimes you generalize, sometimes you refine them. Now I will stop here. If any one of you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Birsdar.
Yeah, thank you, madam. So now I request to audience, if they have any question, they can unmute and they can ask the question to madam. Now audience can ask the question. Now it is open for the discussion.
Well, if they have no questions, fine.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Good morning.
My name is Shweta Siddharth. Ma'am, I am from a business background, so I just wanted to know if there are any applications in business of fractional derivatives.
Madam, I really do not know about them, but all I can suggest you is that if you have any mathematical model using ordinary derivatives, you can try it with fractional derivative and see what happens, simulate your results. And most of the time in engineering fields and in most other areas, what the applied people are saying is that it has been very, very useful and is very helpful. So my simple suggestion would be is that if you have a mathematical model using ordinary derivatives, just shift them to a fractional derivative and simulate and see what happens.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, two more participants raise their hands. They
Yes.
can ask the question. Yes, they raised their hands. Any more question from audience, please?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Can we for mono-iterative technique or the fractional differential equations which involves Hebrew type of fractional derivative and Atangana fractional derivative?
Sir, I think
Hello.
hello. Yes, I heard your question. What you were saying was that can we develop monotone iterative technique for Atangano-Bellino derivative, right?
Yes.
I am sure, sir, you can do it. Only the thing is you need to find the criteria which satisfies those equations. See, basically in mathematics, I don't think that
Okay.
there is nothing that we cannot do. It is only that you have to find the criteria that satisfies those conditions. And one more thing I would like to share over here, since you have said this, I think both Caputo Catakampala derivative and Caputo Fabrizio derivative and this Atangano Bellino Caputo derivative, all three, not much of the theory has been developed in the sense of Professor V. Lakshmikantam's approach of upper and lower solutions or comparison theorems. Now, if you permit me, I'd like to say that this comparison technique is a very important technique. Can I have 2 minutes?
Yes, madam, please.
Okay.
Yes.
See, because this comparison has come up, I would like to share something. Now, look, in life or everywhere, if there is no comparison, there is nothing. Okay, comparison dictates our lives. And this concept, which is so vital in life, has been extended by Professor V. Lakshmikantam to mathematics. And he used to say that to him, mathematics and life were one. And I always feel that this technique of comparison is an excellent technique that helps us to find the solutions or to study the theory in a very nice way. Yes. One more question.